Our keynote today is Dr. Katherine Hayhoe, and this whole thing has happened in a way that is really Spirit-led because it just keeps unfolding. And Katherine is here because she was already going to be in the state and was looking for another opportunity. And so things have just come together, and we're very thankful for that. We teach and preach that in the climate crisis, that creation provides us enough. And that is what we're experiencing today, enough. Enough people are here, enough people volunteered, enough things connected to make this happen. Today we celebrate that together we have enough, and we thank you for being here today and for being called to climate action. It is a great honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Katherine Hayhoe, a climate scientist, a professor in the Department of Political Science, a director of the Climate Center, and an associate in the Public Health Program of the Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. She's been a lead author on the last 3 national climate assessments, but the most important work she is doing is calling people to climate action. She relentlessly connects values and faith with the science. No one in the country is doing more to invite all people, regardless of faith, ideology, politics, geography, or life experiences, into finding solutions for climate change. She's building bridges. She's bringing hope. She's inspiring the change the science is calling us to embrace. Dr. Katherine Hayhoe.
Thank you, Matt, and I'm so glad I could be here today. I don't think this is working, but I think the acoustics in here are so great you can hear me anyways, right? Oh, it is working. Okay. Yeah, I didn't think it was working. It's on the side, okay. That's not a fit. Oh, okay.
Yep. There you go.
Okay, how's that? It's working, yes. Now it's working, okay. But the acoustics really are good in here. I think you could probably hear me anyway. So I'm so glad to be with you here today, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an assumption. And the assumption I'm going to make is that we don't need to talk too much about the science. Now, if anybody does have any questions about the science, how do we know climate is changing? How do we know humans are responsible? What does it mean for us living here in Iowa? There's a lot of great resources that you can use, and on YouTube, we actually have a series called Global Weirding, not warming, weirding. Which is about 35 super short videos that answer a lot of common questions that people have. But I'm not going to speak to that today. And if you have questions about that, I would encourage you to check out Global Weirding, or also check out a really great website called skepticalscience.com that answers all of the top questions that people have about science. And if you want answers to those to share with other people, I would encourage you to write those down too. So Skeptical Science and Global Weirding are the 2 resources I recommend. But what I'm going to do today is I want to talk more about the most important thing that we can do who are already concerned about this issue, and some of the pitfalls and traps that we often fall into along our journey. So when it comes to the most important thing we can do, this was a question that confronted me early on. Until I moved to Texas, I was sort of a typical scientist, doing your research, presenting at conferences, publishing papers. And then I moved to Texas, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go because I had already figured out by then that there was a lot of people who didn't think that climate change was real. And I had already figured out that a lot of those people probably live in Texas. And the reason we were moving is because the university wanted my husband, and I was the plus one. So I was really not sure how it was going to go. But within about 2 months of arriving in Texas, I got my first invitation to speak to a women's group. They were very curious about climate change. They heard a lot of conflicting information. They weren't sure who to believe. So they thought, oh, well, if we have somebody at our local university, then maybe we should talk to them. So I got my very first invitation to speak to a group where not everybody was on board, but they were curious and they had questions. So So I did the best that I could with the science, and then I listened very carefully to the questions they gave me, which were questions about, well, what about volcanoes, or how do you know that it's really happening? And so I went back and I looked up the answers to those, and then the next time I got invited, which was just a few weeks later, because somebody at that talk invited me to speak to their group, I answered those questions in my presentation, and then I listened very carefully to the questions I got next. And then over a couple of, speaking to a women's group, then a book club, then the senior citizens home, after a couple of iterations, it got to the point where there weren't any more science questions. I was starting to get more questions about, well, we live in West Texas, so why do we care? So then I realized I had to start talking more about the impacts, because it isn't just about the polar bears, it's about what happens to us. So in addition to science, I started talking about, well, we have droughts and we have floods, and as climate changes, the dice are being loaded against us. We're seeing more frequent events. We're seeing stronger events, and they affect our economy. They affect our food. They affect our health and our welfare. So then the more I talked about that, then I started to get questions about, what can I do? And for me as a scientist, that's the hardest question, because we diagnose problems. We can diagnose the heck out of a problem. We can tell you within decimal points, what's responsible, how bad it is, how much worse it's going to get depending on our choices. But we're not fixers. We're diagnosers. So that really challenged me, because I understood that you can't talk about a problem without telling people a solution to it. I mean, if somebody told you about a horrible problem but there was nothing you could do about it, what would your response be? If there's nothing I can do, why worry about it? It's just needless anxiety. So I realized that it's actually really irresponsible to talk about a problem without talking about a solution. But I thought to myself, well, what am I supposed to tell people? Light bulbs? Sure. I mean, nothing wrong with that, right? Recycling, good idea. Well, what about, maybe do an energy audit on your house? And so I started to, do some research. And then I realized that when we actually look at our personal carbon footprint, they're very different. So we like to seize on one thing, our favorite thing, and say if everybody did this would fix the problem. But unfortunately, that isn't true. We all live very different lives. And so I started to share with people, well, the most effective thing we can do is probably to step on the carbon scales, to measure your carbon footprint, and then figure out where your carbon footprint comes from. Because some people will say, oh, well, it's all commuting. And for some people it may be if they drive long distances every day on a regular basis in a relatively inefficient car. For other people, you might say, well, it's all our diet. We just eat way too much meat, and cutting meat out of our diet or going meat-free a couple of days a week would be the easiest way to reduce our carbon footprint. For me personally, it was travel. My travel is the biggest part of my carbon footprint. So I decided that I was going to start transitioning now I'm up to about 80% of my talks are virtual talks. So I give, on average, about 2 virtual talks a week, which is fantastic, because you can give a lot more of them that way, and also there's hardly any carbon involved. And when I do travel, I only travel when I have multiple events in one place. So I was here in Ames and Cedar Falls, now Cedar Rapids, and Dubuque, doing multiple events in just 2.5 days. But then I realized, even if every single one of us reduce our carbon footprint as much as we can, and it's really difficult to reduce our carbon footprint to zero unless we decide to live off the grid and grow our own vegetables and never travel anywhere. Even if we all reduce our footprint as much as we can, that wouldn't be enough to fix the problem. It wouldn't. Because we need system-wide change too. If you look at the carbon emissions that are the primary reason why climate is changing today, only 100 companies have produced 70% of emissions since the beginning of the industrial era. So all the personal choices in the world are not going to change that. We need system-wide change. So that was when I started to also look at public opinion data. Because I'm very interested in making sure that we meet people where we're at. If we're going to have a conversation, we want to make sure that that conversation is effective. So I started to look at the public opinion polling data that had just started to come out after I had started speaking to different groups. And as a scientist, I was concerned primarily about the fact that many people think that the science isn't real. And if we listen in the media, if we listen to news articles, no matter what we listen to, it seems like That's the biggest and most dangerous myth that we feel like the largest number of people have bought into, the idea that science is somehow optional. That I could say gravity isn't real and I could step off the cliff and somehow I'd be okay. Or I can say, well, I don't believe climate is changing and it won't be changing because I don't believe it is. This type of idea, the idea that facts are somehow optional or a matter of opinion, it's been around for a long time. There was a book called Anti-Intellectualism in America that was published in 1963. The idea that somehow our opinions are better than facts has been endemic in society for decades and for generations. So as a response, we often think, and we scientists are more guilty than anyone else in doing this, we often think, well, if they just knew the right information, they would change their minds, right? And that idea does work in some cases. So for example, if I asked you, well, what do you think dark matter is made out of? And either you said, I had no idea, or you said, well, it's probably this. And then I said, well, actually, the latest science says that dark matter is made out of this. Most people would say, okay, right? I mean, you have no intrinsic objection to what dark matter is made of, right? So when there's nothing particularly, when we have no strong identity or emotions attached to something and we get more information on it, we're generally okay with it. But when we have very strong identity or ideology or emotions attached to something, and somebody says, oh, no, what do? We feel like that they're trying to take away something. It's almost like Linus with his blanket. Remember Charlie Brown? That they're trying to take away something that's really important to us. And if somebody's trying to take away something that's important to you, what do? Do you say okay and hand it to them? Or do you push back? You hang on to that blanket even tighter. You're like, no, you can't take this away from me. This is really important. In fact, what studies have shown is the smarter we are and the better educated we are, the better we are at going out and finding reasons to defend our pre-existing opinion than changing our mind. And we all do this. Do not get me wrong. So just as an example, I feel very strongly that if the yogurt is past its expiration date, it is still okay to eat. My husband, who is another very intelligent person, he says not. So we have had some arguments where we each go out and we find peer-reviewed journal articles that show that you either can or cannot eat the yogurt. We've compromised on I eat it and he doesn't. But to my point, neither of us gave in on our opinion on the yogurt. We just looked for more information to show why we were correct about it. And yogurt is nothing. It is insignificant compared to the emotions we have attached to an issue like climate change today. So we often think that the biggest myth people have bought into, and the myth that we have to fight the hardest against, is the idea that the science isn't real, that I don't agree with the science. And so in order to combat that, we provide people with information. But, again, what the social science has showed is that the more we present people with information, the more they see it as we're trying to take their blanket away from them, we're trying to actually attack them personally, and the more they resist and the stronger they dig in. I don't know if anybody here has seen a TV documentary. The first season actually won an Emmy for Best Documentary, called The Years of Living Dangerously. Anybody seen The Years? Okay, few hands. All right. If you haven't, this is something else to write down. You have a piece of paper there, so hopefully you can find a pen or pencil somewhere. So far we're at 3 resources now: Global Weirding, Skeptical Science, and Years of Living Dangerously. So Years of Living Dangerously is, season 1 is about 6 to 8 different episodes, and then they have season 2 too. And in episode 4 of season 1, I think it's called The Preacher's Daughter, it's about my friend, Anna Jane Joyner. Her dad is a big megachurch pastor, and he is very opposed to the idea that climate is changing due to human activity. So the episode was about Anna Jane bringing in people, including me and some other people, to talk to her dad about this issue. And what happened was the classic backfire effect. In fact, I could predict it. I could see it coming. I pretty much could have put money on the outcome of it. What happened was the more people told him he was wrong, the further he dug into it. And so by the end of the episode, his heels were dug even further in than they had been when it began. Because he viewed all of those people who were talking to him as people who were coming directly against him and trying to say, you're wrong, you're a bad person, who you are is not right. And that's our defense mechanism when people do that to us. We dig in and say, I am wrong. I am a good person. So often, we think that that's the biggest problem. But the biggest problem, really, when we look at public opinion data, the biggest problem, and I'm taking this from the Yale Climate Opinion Map. So let's see, who has seen these maps? They're maps of the whole country, and they divide out answers by county. Okay, a few hands, a couple of hands. Ooh, actually about the same number as years of living dangerously. Good. Okay, so this is the next resource to write down, the Yale Climate Opinion Maps. And if you just Google Yale Climate Opinion Maps, they'll pop right up. If you look at those, the first map says, do you think that climate change is changing due to human activities? And the country's pretty sort of, probably, but not too strong, right? But then you say, is global warming happening? And the entire country is pretty much like, yes, it's happening. And then you say, do you think it's going to affect plants and animals and future generations? And people are like, oh, yes. And then you say, well, do you think it's going to affect people in developing countries and people in the United States? And people are like, yes. In fact, many more people say yes to that than say it's happening due to human activities. And then they ask this question. They say, do you think it will affect, and remember they've already asked, do you think it will affect people in the U.S.? And most people say yes. Do you think it will affect you? And all of a sudden, the whole map, which was orange means more than 50%, the whole map was blue, which means less than 50%. All of a sudden, we think it will affect the person who literally is sitting next to us, not us. It's a bit magical thinking. So the biggest myth that the largest number of people are bought into is not that the science isn't real, it's that it doesn't affect us. And the map is blue even across areas where you would think everybody's convinced, like Florida. So why is this so important? Because even if we think it's real, but we don't think it affects us, then why would action be needed? See what I mean? It isn't that we don't think it's real, it's that we think it doesn't matter, so it slides way down our priority scale to the things that don't matter, like that closet under the stairs that we never look at until we move. And then we're horrified to find out what was actually in it. I've had that experience myself. Anybody else? Yes. So then, there's one more question that is even a darker blue, which means more people said no to it. And this relates directly back to what I was talking about before. The next question that they asked people, which pretty much everybody said no to, is this. Do you ever talk about it or hear anybody else talking about it? And the answer was no. So that is why, after more than 10 years of trying to answer the question for people of what's the most important thing we can do, after more than 10 years of this, I have concluded the single most important thing that every individual can do, every person, is talk about it. Because we are not talking about it. And if we don't talk about it, why would we care? And if we don't care, why would we ever act or ask others to act too? But when we talk about it, I do not mean bringing out 10 feet of scientific reports and hitting people upside the head with them. Last night, I don't know if you follow me on social media, but last night I was really excited to announce something. I'm writing a new book. And the book is about how to have conversations about climate change. And I asked people to send me your stories about conversations that you've had. And one person responded and he said, I'm really looking forward to reading your book, but make sure you make it thick so I can use it to hit people over the head with. That sort of defeats the whole purpose. So I am not talking about dragging out all of the science that we've been doing since the 1850s, because that is how long we've known. that digging up and burning fossil fuels produces heat-trapping gases that cause the planet to warm. Because people might say, well, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not really qualified or capable. No, that's not the most important thing we talk about, because that's not the greatest myth that we've got into. The two greatest myths we've got into are, first of all, the idea that it doesn't matter to us, and then second of all, the idea that I'm not the right type of person to care about the solutions. The solutions are inconsistent or incompatible with who I am. And so the two most important things for us to talk about are what? How it matters to us today in the places where we live, not the person beside us, but us personally, and solutions that are practical and viable and positive and things that we can get on board with no matter who we are. So I want to unpack those two topics for you to kind of give you some examples. So we often think, well, climate change matters to what? People agree it matters to plants and animals. It matters to polar bears. It matters to future generations. It matters to people who live on low-lying islands in the South Pacific. Can't really pronounce their names, but we know that they're flooding, right? But we think it doesn't matter to us. And so that's why it's so important to connect the dots. And this is why I spent so much of my time working on the National Climate Assessment, because it talks very specifically about how climate change is already affecting Iowa, what is already happening in Iowa, what is going to be happening in the near future, how climate change is affecting our water, our farms, our agriculture, our food, our air quality, our health, our infrastructure, our economy, even national security. The National Climate Assessment connects the dots between this huge global issue and what it means to us living here today. So what are we at now? I think we're on number 4, resource number 4 now. Resource number 4 is the National Climate Assessment. Now, don't worry, it is 1,600 pages long, and I'm not telling you to read the whole thing at all. At the beginning of every chapter, they have nice key messages. You can just read the headlines if you want to. Or you can jump straight to whatever chapter you're most interested in. So to find the National Climate Assessment, you would go to NCA, the National Climate Assessment, NCA, 2018 globalchange.gov, G-O-V. So NCA 2018.globalchange.gov. And you can find a chapter specifically about the Midwest that has lots of Iowa examples. And you can find chapters specifically about things like agriculture and water. We also, in our global weirding, which is resource number 1, we have a global weirding episode for each region of the U.S. So if you'd rather just watch a short video, you can do that too. It's based on the National Climate Assessment. So talking about how it matters to us is really, really important. And how does climate change matter to people in Iowa? Well, water is a big part of it, right? Heavy rainfall, flooding. Specific examples you can point to, people you know who've been harmed by the flooding. Also warmer temperatures, season shifting, pests and invasive species creeping northward, increased risk of heat in the summer. We're seeing a lot of changes right here, and we can talk about those changes. So that's the first most important thing to talk about, is how it matters to us in the places where we live. And then the second thing to talk about is why it matters to us who we already are. Now this one's a little kind of non-intuitive, but follow me here because I think this is really the most important point. We think, well, of course you care if you're a scientist, right? Because you're a scientist, so you study this stuff. So of course you would care if you're a scientist. And then we think, well, if you're an environmentalist, of course you would care too. As if somehow people could float around in outer space without our planet. So by being an environmentalist, you care about the environment and nature, but you don't care about people. Doesn't quite make sense, but that's what people think. Well, I'm not an environmentalist. And then today, one of the biggest things people think is, well, I'm not a liberal. I'm not a Democrat. So I can't care about a changing climate because that's only something that those people care about. How did the number a thermometer gives us become so politically polarized? It became politically polarized deliberately. When the organizations, the companies, the people who hold the balance of power and wealth in this world when they realize that climate solutions threaten their bottom line. If you go to Wikipedia and you look at the list of the richest corporations in the world, at the top you have Walmart, and Walmart plans to be 50% clean energy by 2025. So Walmart has a climate plan, clean energy plan. And then after Walmart, you have petroleum, energy, petroleum, automotive, and automotive companies made most of their money how? Selling things that burn petroleum. And then energy, petroleum, and then down about number 12 you have Apple, and Apple is already 100% clean energy, and they are decarbonizing their supply chain in China right now. So you look at this list, and all of a sudden you recognize that the balance of power and wealth in this world lie in the hands of those who have every incentive to keep us addicted to fossil fuels as long as possible. So the fifth resource on the list, if you're interested in digging more into this and finding out more about how did this become so politicized, where did the money come from, who did it go to, and what did they do with it to make it politicized, there is a fantastic book or movie, either one, called Merchants of Doubt. I bet a bunch of you have seen that. Anybody here seen? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Merchants of Doubt. And really, I recommend both the book and the movie because they're not quite the same thing. The book is more kind of unpacks and tracks all of the money and all of the PR and all of these smoke screens. And then the movie actually talks to some of these people who are receiving the money and promoting the smoke screens. You can actually hear from their own voices how they think what they're doing is perfectly fine. So as a result of these decades of polarization, people think, well, I'm not the right type of person to care because I'm not a scientist, or I'm not an environmentalist, or I'm not a Democrat. They think, if I'm conservative, then this is not something I care about. And now here's where things get a bit crazy and we feel a bit like we're living in Alice in Wonderland, because if you are conservative, do you not want to conserve? Isn't that conservation the hallmark of a conservative? Is not being cautious, being conservative with our resources, not what we want to do? It is, right? And then here's where it gets even crazier. People think, if I'm a Christian, I can't care. And they literally say things that sound religious-y, but they actually directly contradict what the Bible says. And as Catholics, I may add, they often directly contradict what the Pope says too. And if you are Catholic, does that not mean that you should be agreeing with what the Pope says, mostly? And if you are a Christian of any type, does that not mean you should be agreeing with what the Bible says? Is that not what a Christian is? I once asked the president of the National Association of Evangelicals, a man called Luke Anderson, who's a pastor in Minnesota, who just retired recently. I asked him, what is your definition of an evangelical? And he said, my definition is somebody who takes the Bible seriously. So then, we live in a world where, apparently, according to polls, half of the people who self-identify as evangelicals who voted for Trump don't even go to church. And a large number of the people who I interact with on a nearly daily basis, especially through social media and through email and things like that, a large number of them say things to me that sound religiously, but when you go to the Bible, it's exactly 180 degrees. So let me give you an example. The most common argument I hear is, well, God's in control, so it's all going to work out anyways. But in Genesis 1, which is the first chapter in the Bible, at the beginning, you get to this on the first page. In Genesis 1, it says, God gave humans responsibility, or in the old translation, dominion, over every living thing on this planet. Who? Us. Humans. God gave it to us. So if we are the ones with the responsibility, then clearly we are the ones who have been given the ability to make decisions. And then all the way at the end of the Bible in Revelation, it actually says God will destroy those who destroy the earth. So interestingly, our global weirding episode on what does the Bible say about climate change is our most watched episode. Isn't that interesting? It is not a faith-based series. It's a PBS series, if that's the one everybody wants to watch. Then there's people who say, the second most common argument is, well, the world's going to end anyway, so why does it matter, right? And people being people, it turns out that people were saying exactly that same thing back when the New Testament was being written. Yeah, not much changes. They were specifically people who were living in the Greek city of Thessalonica, and the Apostle Paul wrote to them, and basically, in so many words, said, get a job, because they were like, oh, well, Christ is returning any moment, so we'll just kind of sit back and wait. It's like, get a job, care for the widows, care for the orphans, care for the poor. You don't know the day or the time, so that doesn't mean that you're supposed to fold your hands and say Maranatha. It means that you're supposed to do what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be walking in the good works that have been prepared for you in advance. So the first greatest myth, again, is that we don't think it matters to us. And the second greatest myth is we don't think we're the right type of person to care. But when you start digging into what conservatives really believe, what Christians really believe, it turns out that we're the exact person to care. In fact, when we put those two myths together in terms of how it affects us and who we believe ourselves to be, it turns out that we might even already care, we just haven't connected the dots or recognized it. And this is a really important perspective for us to take as we have these conversations with people. Because if we approach a conversation with the perspective of believing in the myths, believing that more information is going to change people's minds, believing that it matters to things that matter to me, but not them, like the polar bear or future generations, they do matter to me and they matter to a lot of people. But if we approach somebody else thinking, okay, well, you don't care about the things I care about, what's the subtext to that attitude? If I care about something and you don't care about something, and I think you should care about it, the subtext is you're not a good person, right? Because you don't care about these things. That's the subtext. And believe me, we're really good at picking up on that, right? And then, when we assume, furthermore, that who they are, their core identity, which could be I am a farmer or a grower or a producer. It could be I am a Republican. It could be I'm a Christian. It could be I'm a Catholic. It could be I'm an evangelical. When we assume that their identity is incompatible and inconsistent with understanding that climate is changing, humans are responsible, the impacts are serious, and we need to act now, we're going even further to tell them that what their identity is wrong, and they have to change who they fundamentally are. And to be perfectly honest, do you want to change who you fundamentally are? No. That's a big role of us as parents, is to help our children develop an identity. But by the time you're our age, you don't want somebody coming along and telling you what your new identity is. So, especially if you don't really agree with it. So I have a lot of people talk to me, and in recent days, I have had people say things to me like, why can't I find your email address online? And I say, well, I have a website, and everybody can email me through my website. And they say, well, I want your email address. And I said, why? And I said, to start a dialogue with you. And I said, what about? And they said, to educate you. So what was my reaction to that? What would be your reaction to that? See, I'm not even going to say. I think you know, right? So what if we're the person doing that to somebody else? What's their reaction going to be? I don't really want to be educated by you. Thank you very much, right? And then what if somebody says to you, well, you don't understand what's important. Here's what's really important. What would your reaction be? I do understand what's important. Thank you very much, right? And then even worse, and I just had this experience actually on social media this morning, even worse, when somebody says to you, who you are is foolish and superstitious, misguided and wrong. How would you react to somebody who says something like that to you? Would you be willing to listen to what they had to say after that? Probably not so much, right? Now, these are a little tiny bit exaggerated, so you can really, not exaggerated from what people said to me. That's actually what they said. But they're situations that are a little bit more in bold as opposed to just regular text, so to speak. But we have all been guilty of being on the other side of that. Because even if we use words that don't say those things, if our attitude behind those words is, you do not have the right values, you are not the right person, I will fix you, if that is our attitude behind the conversation we have, it's not going to go anywhere. But here's the good news. The good news is this. I have become firmly convinced that with just a very few number of exceptions, every single one of us is already the perfect person to care. Now, there's a few people in this world who care nothing for anyone else. And with those people, I think maybe they're not the perfect person to care. But those people are a lot fewer and far between than we think. Why? Because climate change is not just a science issue. Of course it is a science issue, but it's not just. Climate change is not just an environmental issue either. Why do we care about a changing climate? We care about it because it affects our health. Who doesn't care? Right? You can have all the money in the world, but if you do not have your health, you have nothing. It affects our families. It affects our communities. It affects our food and our water, and every human needs food and water. It affects our security and our safety. It affects the economy. It affects our bank accounts through increasing insurance rates and costs. It affects the poorest people in the world more than anyone else. It exacerbates hunger and poverty and disease and lack of access to clean water. It even exacerbates political instability in regions and states where they're already failing, and climate change can be like the final straw on the camel's back that pushes it over the edge. Climate change affects almost every single aspect of human life on this planet. Through having conversations with people, I have learned that climate change affects the ability of IT to provide services. Climate change affects emergency response because often they're staffed by the thermometer. Climate change affects our mental health. Climate change affects our physical health. Climate change affects everything. So to care about a changing climate, we already are the perfect person to care, but nobody has helped us to connect the dots between who we already are and why we actually already care, and there's even climate actions that we would support if we knew about them. Now, think about this attitude for that. If somebody comes to you and expresses to you through their words and their attitude, because again, attitude, I hope you're understanding this here, attitude is just as important, if not more than words. If somebody comes to you and expresses through their attitude and their words to you that you're a great person, that you have good values, that who you are, that what you built your identity on is a good thing. If someone respects you, if someone honors you, if someone appreciates you, and then someone says to you, because of who you are, which is a great person who I respect and appreciate, because of who you are, you would already care about this if you knew. And let me share with you why I care, because I care because of much the same reason why you care. It's something natural for us to care about. So understanding that who we already are as the perfect person to care was a huge breakthrough for me in talking about it, because it shifted completely not only the content but the attitude of how I have these conversations. But then I learned one more thing, which I think is even more fascinating, and that is that not only do we want to be respected for who we are and acknowledged for who we are, but we actually crave opportunities to be even more of who we are. So if there's something that, and I'll just give you a classic example, and this sounds small and silly, but I'm from Ontario, Canada, And our family, so in Canada, having a cottage is a big thing. We call them cottages with running water inside. They're cabins they built. Just FYI. So we did have running water in ours. It was from the 1920s because the cottage was built in 1908. We actually had a clawfoot bathtub that was the original bathtub, and that was it. No shower. But our family has been cottaging in this area since my great-grandparents took their honeymoon there in the early 1900s. And our family has cottages all around this bay on a certain lake, and now I have third cousins and fourth cousins who are all on that bay. And it's just really fun to be up there and to interact with and to actually know your third and your fourth cousins. I mean, my son now is some of his friends are his fourth cousins. That's pretty amazing. So when I was in the store, I happened to see a T-shirt down in Toronto that had the name of the lake on it. And I was like, I have to have that T-shirt, and I'm going to buy a few extras because I know my sister and my cousin will want those too. Why? Because that was part of our identity. So having a T-shirt that actually had the name of the lake on it made us even more of what we wanted to be, right? Now that's a very trivial example. But my point is, we want our identity that we've decided is important to us at this part of our life, we want that identity to be reinforced even further. And so here's the really interesting thing when it comes to acting on something. And this is something that I learned from George Marshall. So here's resource number 6. George Marshall is a Brit. He runs an organization called Climate Outreach, which does fantastic work on best practices on communicating on climate change. And he wrote a really good book called Don't Even Think About It, How Our Brains Are Wired to Ignore Climate Change. It's super short little chapters, very funny stories. Part of what he did in writing the book was he toured megachurches in the U.S. to kind of look at how they got people motivated to act. So Don't Even Think About It, How Our Brains Are Wired to Ignore Climate Change by George Marshall. Something that George said has stuck with me because it resonates right into it. Ties right into this. What he said was, again, it isn't only that we are already the perfect person to care, it's that acting on climate will make us even more of who we already are. And that's when you get people to act. When they understand that not only is climate action not opposed to who they are, because so often the solutions that we're told about, they sound opposed to who we are. So what solutions do we hear about that are opposed? Well, it's going to ruin the economy to fix climate change. Or the government's going to be telling us how long showers we can take and nobody's going to be able to drive a truck. Or the latest myth making the round in conservative circles is that the only solution to climate change is abortion. I am not joking. That is the latest myth. And so anybody who's pro-life immediately, well, I can't get on board with climate solutions because that's the only solution. So, first of all, are those the only solutions? Of course not. We're talking about preserving life. We're talking about educating women and girls is one of the top solutions from Project Drawdown. Why? Because it reduces infant mortality rates so people don't have to have as many children because their children last longer and better lives, live longer. So not only is it important to recognize that climate action is not inconsistent with who we are or incompatible with who we are, that's taking us from a negative to a zero. We want to go from a zero to a positive. So from a negative to a zero is it's not inconsistent with who we are, but from a zero to a positive is it makes us even more of who we are by acting on climate. It enhances our identity. It shows that we take being a conservative even more seriously, that we take being a Christian even more seriously, that we take being a good steward of our land as a farmer or a grower even more seriously. That we are a better farmer, that we're a better Christian, that we're a better conservative, that we're a better human, we're a better parent, we're a better citizen of Iowa. We're a better person because we're acting on climate. Does that make sense? Well, let me give you a specific example. I'll show you what I mean. So, skeptical science, second resource on your list, is the brainchild of a man called John Cook. John Cook is a scientist, and he has a father. And every time he went home, his father would be like, well, John, there's more polar bears now than there ever has been. And he'd be like, well, they used to hunt polar bears, but then they stopped hunting them, so the populations grew a bit, but now they're declining. And then the next time he'd be home, his dad would be like, well, John, I heard the ice caps on Mars are melting. So John through digging into all of these issues, he builds this website that becomes the premier website in the entire world that answers more than 200 but what about questions about climate science with detailed answers that link directly to the original science. He goes back to school and he does a Ph.D. in social science to understand denialism. He becomes one of the foremost experts in the world in debunking science-related myths. And do you think it changes his father's mind? Didn't. But then, in the area where his father lived, and this just happened a couple of years ago, in the area where his father lived in Australia, the government offered a rebate on solar panels. Now, what is his father's identity? I have not met his father, so I'm extrapolating here. But his father's identity, from what I have picked up, is that of a shrewd, smart, fiscal conservative. His father's identity is somebody who does not spend money with a spade, somebody who's careful with their money, somebody who is truly conservative, somebody who's smart, somebody who would enjoy sticking it to the government if given the chance. So here you are, he's offered this rebate, he calculates the numbers, he realizes, wow, I can really take advantage of this. He installs the solar panels, he saves so much money, he goes around boasting to everybody knows about how much money he's saving. And now when John shows up for dinner, he's not being asked about polar bears, he's being shown the saving sheets from the solar panels. So what happened, those solar panels reinforced his father's identity. It made him an even smarter and shrewder fiscal conservative than he already was, right? And so after about a year, his dad says to John, he says, well, John, he says, you might be right about that whole global warming thing. But I'm doing my part. I have my solar panels. So in other words, instead of being the bad person who's opposing the solutions, I am now the good person who's part of the solution, so I can afford to acknowledge the reality of the problem because now there's a solution I can accept. Because 99, in fact, I would even go further and say 99.9% of the time, when you have a conversation with somebody that begins with it's just a natural cycle, within a minute or two, that conversation will take a 90-degree turn into the EPA wants to take away my truck, or the government wants to destroy our economy, or what about China? They're going to take over the world if we let them. Never mind that China has more wind and solar energy than anyone else. That usually doesn't factor into the conversation. So our real problem is solution aversion. We don't think their solutions compatible and consistent with who we are. So what are we doing when we have conversations with people? We are talking about how it matters to us in the places where we live, and we are talking about solutions that are consistent and compatible with who they already are so they can get on board with the solution, because once they're on board with the solution, the sciencey and religious arguments sort of evaporate. And what I really see my role as doing is, in the book of James, there's a verse in the Bible that talks about how you're like a man who looked in a mirror and then went away and forgot what he looked like. So when I talk to people, I've started to feel as if I'm holding up a mirror. And I'm just holding up that mirror to remind people of who they already are. Because we've lost our way. We've forgotten who we are. Whoever it is that we've decided that we are. We're not acting consistent with who we are. And again, not every single human, but most of us already have the values we need to care about a changing climate. We just haven't connected the dots. So when you have that conversation, helping someone connect the dots to a place that they will eventually want to be, an even more genuine version of who they already are, which is where we do want to be, helping somebody connect the dots is a lot easier than telling somebody who you are is inadequate, who you are is wrong, who you are is bad, you have to change. Those conversations rarely end well. But having a conversation that takes someone to a place where they want to be, that's where the conversation can end well. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. I want to encourage you to have those conversations about things that matter, connecting to people's values, and I want to close with a brief story about why these conversations matter. So my TED Talk, which talks about how talking about climate change is the most important thing that any individual person can do. And when I say talk, I don't necessarily mean you have to use your mouth, although it helps. You can use your hands. You can do it virtually too. But engaging with another human being and discussing why this issue matters and what we can do to fix it, that was what I think is the most important thing. So my TED Talk came out this past December, not even a year ago, 10 months ago. And then in May, I was in the UK for one of my bundles where I do a lot of different speaking engagements in the same area. And I was giving a talk that afternoon at the London School of Economics. After my talk, an older man came up to me who was a community member who had taken the train into London from the town he lived, which has about 160,000 people. He had taken the train in specifically to hear my talk, and afterwards he came up to me and said, I saw your TED Talk, and I decided that we needed to have conversations. So I've been having conversations ever since I watched your talk. And I've been writing down all the conversations that I've had and that people I've talked to have had with other people. Would you like to see the list? I said, yeah, that's awesome. So he reaches in, he pulls out his list, and I was expecting, 70 or 80 people. He pulls out a stack of paper with 10,000 names. They had had 10,000 conversations from December through May in his town of 160,000 people. And as a result, he said that week their city council had just voted to declare a climate emergency because of the conversation. So too often we're trying to act before people understand why it matters. And too often we're trying to force people to understand why it matters before we've even had the conversation with them. So sometimes we really should have it backwards. But talking is acting. That kind of closes the loop, right? Talking is acting. So having that conversation about why it matters to us and what we can do that resonates with who we are, with our identity, with who we believe ourselves to be, is the single most important thing that any one of us can do. Thank you. Thank you so much. We have 15 minutes for questions now, and here's how we're going to do the questions. This is going to be a little unorthodox, all right? So you have to listen carefully. How we're going to do the questions is you're going to take out your phone. And if you don't have a phone, nudge the person beside you and get them to help you on their phone, okay? Because you can do this together. All right, you're going to get out your phone, and you're going to go to pollev.com. That is P-O-L-L, poll, E-V, as an electric vehicle, pollev.com, okay? And when you go there, it's going to ask you to enter the poll, and the name of the poll is my university, which is Texas Tech. No caps, no spaces. T-E-X-A-S-T-E-C-H, Texas Tech. So you go to pollev.com, Texas Tech. And when you go there, it's going to ask you to enter your name. Your name does not matter. Enter whatever you want. I don't collect the names. It's just anonymous. You can enter XX, really all matters. I think that's why I actually enter myself. And then, pretty soon, just a second here, it should tell you, it should say, welcome to Texas Tech's presentation. Anybody got a screen that says, welcome to Texas Tech's presentation? Okay. About a quarter of people. Okay. A few more. All right. Texas Tech. That's the name of my university. T-E-X-A-S, Texas, and then T-E-C-H. Tech. No spaces. No spaces. Just Texas Tech. Okay? And then it says, as soon as they display a poll, we'll update it. So, I'm going to display a poll now. There we go. Okay, I just displayed a poll. Now, it should say questions. Anybody see questions? Okay, good. Now, if you don't have your phone with you, that's okay, because you can ask somebody beside you to type in your question. You can ask as many questions as you want. So go ahead, if you have a question, go ahead and type in a question. And now here's the cool thing. Once the questions start to appear, you can upvote the questions that you like. So we don't have time to answer 50 questions, but we definitely have time to answer the top questions. So even if you don't have a question, still look there. And if you see a question you like, you can tap to upvote it. Okay? Yeah. Now, again, if you don't have a phone, that's okay. Lean over to somebody who has one. Here, put up our hands again. So anybody who has your phone going with a question, okay? Put up your hands if you have your phone and it's working. Okay? Now, if you don't have a question but you have a phone, go ahead and take it out and offer it to somebody who's offered to type in a question for somebody who doesn't have one, if you don't mind. Good experiment in sharing. So even if you don't have a question, take out your phone, go to polev.com, enter Texas Tech, and then ask somebody beside you if they have a question they want. All right. We already have a bunch of questions at the top. Isn't this great? Question number 1 so far with 9 votes is, what are good prompts to help start the conversation? Question number 2, as an elementary teacher, do you have any recommendations to help kids learn about the issue? Question number 3, how do you talk to a stranger whose values you don't know? And number 4, how do you get college students to come to climate talks in the first place? Free pizza is always a good idea. Okay, let's start answering these, and you can go ahead and keep voting questions, keep entering questions. You can do this as long as we're talking, okay? And if you don't have a phone, lean over to somebody who does and ask them to answer your question. Okay, what are good prompts to start the conversation, and how do you communicate with a stranger whose values you don't know? These are sort of the same question. If you don't know where to start the conversation, you should be asking the other person about them. Ask them about themselves. How their week has been, how their family is, where did they go on vacation or holiday, what are their plans for Christmas. Ask somebody about themselves and keep going until something comes up where you can connect the dots. That's the best thing to do because, again, remember, conversations thrive when they're built on respect and when they're built on appreciation. Everybody loves talking about themselves. So ask somebody questions and be genuinely interested in what they have to say. Now, sometimes you might not find a point of connection in that conversation. And if you don't find a point of connection, you don't need to strong-arm the conversation around. That's a bit awkward. You just might not be the right person to have a conversation with them. Like if you're having a conversation with them and it turns out that they are passionate about microbrewing, and you couldn't care less about beer. Now, there are connections between climate change and beer. But if you're not familiar with them and you don't really care about them, you're not the person to have that conversation. You could just mention, hey, I don't know anything about it, but I've heard that climate change is affecting beer. And they could be like, oh, really? That's interesting. You could be like, maybe go look it up. But the best thing to do, the best place to have that conversation is just start talking, asking them questions. And when I go speak to a group, what I typically do if I'm not familiar with the group is I want to make sure that I have a conversation with the person who invited me, and I ask them a lot of questions about the group. Like, who all's there? What do you care about? What types of things do you do? What do you have in common? So asking rather than telling is the most important way that we can find the good prompts to help start the conversation and that we can go about communicating with a stranger. Now, what helps, though, is being informed ourselves, right? So if we're not informed and there's a conversation going on and beer came up and we didn't know that beer is affected by climate change, we wouldn't be able to immediately connect the dots, right? So being informed is really important. There's lots of good news websites that kind of collect information. So I make sure that I am informed. I have some statistics on wind in Iowa and in Texas that I can bring out if needed. I have some statistics on jobs and clean energy and how those compare to jobs in coal and the fossil fuel industry that I can bring out if needed. I have information on, the 500-year floods that are happening and how they're getting more frequent and what the damages were. And I know kind of enough to say, hey, yep, okay, beer is affected, chocolate's affected, coffee's affected, our cities are affected. So being prepared is really, really important, making sure that you know kind of a broad swath of the people you're talking to, how their values will be affected. And the Munns Clean Air Force, which you saw in the T6 manual. The Moms Clean Air Force is great on connecting the dots between our kids' health, because we all care about our kids' health. Our kids' health and our changing climate. Okay. So the next one is, how would you get low-income communities more involved in climate action? And this is good. You guys are really getting into this. You've got about 20 votes for the top questions. So with low-income communities, it's often I would say, a more critical, a more serious situation of the same thing that we see elsewhere, which is people say it's just not on my priority, right? So if I don't even know how to feed my family, climate change is not on my priority list. If my kids have asthma and I can't even pay for an inhaler, climate change is not on my priority. If our neighborhood has been flooded 3 times in 3 years by 500-year flood events, and I have no resources to cope with rebuilding my home for the 3rd time, and so we're just going to have to leave our neighborhood, where we live in community, where there's people who can help us, climate change is the last thing on my priority. Well, you see where I'm going, right? The only reason we care about climate change is not because it's number 5, 8, or 15 in our priority list. It's because it affects everything that's already at the top of our priority list. And in lower income communities, even more so. The things that are at the very top of our priority list are the things that are being affected directly by a changing climate. So often, it isn't so much that we ourselves are a big contributor to the problem. The lower income we are, the less we actually contribute to the problem often. But it's about becoming more resilient. It's about being able to prepare. And so in lower income communities, obviously, it's sort of like you go to the hospital and you have a broken leg, you have to fix the broken leg. But when they do a scan of your leg to find out you have bone cancer and actually know somebody this happened to, you got to fix the bone cancer too. So it's a case of we have to, if people are hungry, you have to give them food. You don't want to give somebody a lecture on how climate change will affect the nutritional value of their food if they're literally hungry in that moment. But at the same time, we have to understand that if we ignore climate change, it's like we're pouring everything we have into a bucket with a hole in the bottom, and the hole is climate change, and the hole is getting bigger and bigger to the point where we will no longer be able to even fill the bucket 1/4 if we neglect addressing the impacts of climate change on lower-income communities. So again, it's not a case of moving it further up the list. It's a case of recognizing that number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on our priority list are directly impacted by a changing climate. And we have to look both short-term and we have to look long-term as well. Because a lot of solutions, even like clean energy, they actually help. Better insulation helps reduce our power bills. Clean energy is eventually cheaper. I like a lot of the, when I travel, I do use carbon offsets. I know that a lot of people feel like carbon offsets are sort of akin to buying indulgences back in the day. But I do buy carbon offsets because the motto of the company I use, which is called Climate Stewards, their motto is reduce everything you can and then offset the rest. So I do buy carbon offsets, and I love that they use the money. Climate Stewards, that's number 7 on your list now. But there's many other good ones too. But I love that they use the money to work with low-income communities to help them become more resilient to the impacts of a changing climate. So I think that recognizing, again, that climate change is not a separate issue on our priority list, it affects everything else on it, is the most important thing. Okay. What do I say to the guy who says the EPA wants to take my truck? A bunch of you upvoted that one. Oh. What, I think, yeah, okay. What do you say to the guy who says the EPA wants to take my truck? Well, first of all, if you can't sincerely empathize with him, you might not be the right person to be having the conversation. Because to many people, their truck is part of their identity, right? I mean, I live in Texas. I can tell you it's definitely part of the identity. And if you're a farmer or a rancher or a producer or a grower, then for many people, a truck is not only part of their identity, is an essential tool and part of their livelihood, right? So the first thing to do when someone says the EPA is going to take away my truck is to empathize with what a personally destructive thing that would be to them. You might not drive a truck yourself, but if you cannot put yourself in their shoes and understand how that would be ripping away part of their identity and possibly even part of their livelihood, then you're not the right person to be having the conversation. So empathizing and acknowledging that first is really important. And then I think it's important to, again, turn the conversation and connect the dots to, but hey, we are having a problem here. I mean, how have you been affected? Tell me about what happened to you during the flood. Did you lose something? Your crops, your home? Did you lose something? Did somebody you know lose something? And hey, did you know that there's solutions that don't involve taking away your crop? There's solutions like Matt is so great talking about, like carbon farming, like regenerative agriculture. There's solutions even like electric vehicles. They're actually turning a lot of farm equipment, including trucks. They're really working hard on electric vehicles. But in the meantime, did you know that there's biodiesel? That's where I was on Monday visiting with RAG over in Ames. There's biodiesel that you can actually put in diesel vehicles that reduces carbon emissions by a huge amount. So giving them options that do not involve ripping their truck out of their cold and dying hands is the most important thing you can do. And there's tons of options. There's immediate options of things they can do on their farm, for example. There's options of things they can actually put in their truck if it's diesel. And then there's things of the future that are coming where we really truly will have heavy equipment that could be electric in the future down the road. We don't have it now, and that's why solutions now are often important. All right. So let's see. We're doing well. How important are agriculture and farmers when it comes to fixing climate change? The answer to that is really important because, and this is something that you might not be aware of, we have to cut carbon emissions as soon as we can and as much as we can, but we also have to suck carbon back out of the atmosphere and put it in the biosphere and the soil where we actually want it, where it's actually good for us. We have to do that. If we don't do that, we have no chance of remaining below 1.5 degrees, and as a scientist who's an optimist, I would actually say we have no chance of remaining below 2 degrees if we don't do that. We really don't. And again, I'm an optimist, so if I say it, you know it's gotta be that. So sucking carbon out of the atmosphere is absolutely essential, and one of the most effective ways we can do that is not through the cool new technology that I am a big fan of, that they suck carbon out of the atmosphere and they turn it into liquid fuel, or they turn it into rock or building materials. That's already happening today. It's very cool, but it's very expensive. The most effective way to suck carbon out of the atmosphere today is through smart forestry and farming. And if you're wondering how to do that, again, Matt has all kinds of great resources on that. Many of them. So that's resource number 8. You Google Matt Russell and you Google agriculture in Iowa, and you will come up with more things than you can shake a stick at. Write that down. So all kinds of techniques like biochar, where you burn agricultural residue at high temperatures and then you plow the carbon back into the soil, where it's like Miracle-Gro on steroids. Things like permanent cover that adds more carbon to the soil through the root mass. Other smart practices, including managed grazing of livestock that sequesters carbon in the soil. There's all kinds of smart solutions, and farmers are the absolute key to helping us draw carbon out of the atmosphere, put it back in the biosphere and the soil where we actually want it. So yes, farmers are a huge part of the solution. And that's a great message, because don't you want to be part of the solution? Don't you want to be one of the heroes who help fix this problem? If somebody is a farmer, a grower, a producer, or a rancher, they are uniquely positioned to be a huge part, a disproportionate part of the solution, and that's really good news. All right. I think we have room for 1 or 2 quick questions now, right? Okay. All right. So as a legislator, we run into climate deniers often. It's frustrating when those creating the laws are not open to conversation and actually make fun of the subject. Do you have any suggestions? How do you start a conversation with the conservative political leaders? The next question. I think those are kind of the same question, right? Well, here's what I found is that if you go in and you say, global warming is real, we have to agree on that, and then we can move forward, some people will say, and I've actually had people say this to me, they said, what you said makes sense after listening to me talk about what we're seeing happening today, how it's affecting us, what's going to happen in the future. What you're saying makes sense, but if I agree with you, I have to agree with Al Gore, and I will never agree with Al Gore. So what I've learned is that I don't care what people call the problem. I do not care. If I could have a conversation with somebody as long as I never mention the words climate and change in sequence, I will have that conversation. And it often ends very well. If I can talk about smart solutions with somebody who agrees with me about the solution but does not agree that climate is changing and humans are responsible, I'm 100% okay with that. I really am. If a producer of cotton in West Texas puts wind turbines on his land, he thinks climate change is a hoax invented by the Chinese, but he's got wind turbines on his land because the check arrives in the mail, I'm 100% okay with that. If a Texas legislator wants to increase our access to wind and solar energy, but they think that climate change is a scheme invented by the liberals to line the pockets of the United Nations and the scientists, but they're willing to advance clean energy in the state, I'm 100% okay with that. So with politicians, with legislators, special brand of human, still human. We're still humans, no matter who we are. And I would venture to say, no offense, but I would venture to say that as politicians get a lot of crap from people. Most times, we vote because we're angry or we're afraid. We pick up the phone because we're mad, right? So disproportionately, politicians hear from people who are angry at them, people who don't like them. So even more important with a politician is to begin with appreciating them, begin with sharing values, begin with doing your research on them and figuring out where the heck you can connect with them. I've been challenged a number of times in this direction, and one time I did my research because these people really wanted me to talk to this politician. And typically, I don't have a lot of conversations unless the person themselves wants to talk, but there's mutual people who really want us to have a conversation. And I was looking at this man, and I was like, I do not know what we have in common. So I went digging, and I dug, and I dug, and I dug, and I finally found out that his passion was prison ministries. That was his passion. And my husband, back when we lived in Indiana, he actually used to do prison ministries. So I was like, bingo. So I was introduced to this man, and you could tell that wild horses had dragged him there. He was not happy to be there. He could barely bring himself to shake my hand. So I grabbed his hand, and while I was holding his hand, I figured this is my only chance. I said, I am so glad to hear that you care about prison ministries. And that stopped in his tracks. He was like, I said, they're so important because, my husband did da, da, da. He's like, oh, you care about prison ministries. And so immediately he wanted to talk to me. And he had things he wanted to tell me, and he had things he wanted to send me and share with me. And then I was able to, I'm not saying it was necessarily successful, but I was able to get a word in edgewise and actually have him listen to me because we found something that we had in common. So I would say with the people who are most opposed, it's even more important to figure out where they're coming from. And if you cannot find something you genuinely share with them, then you are, again, not the person to have the conversation. It has to be genuine. It has to be something that they care about. It has to be something you can truly appreciate about them. And then you might have a door open. It might not be that moment. It might take a while. And in that, I think of a man called Dave. Dave is a retired physician in Utah, very conservative state. When he retired, he realized that he wanted to continue to work in the area of health, and he realized that climate change was one of the biggest threat multipliers, as the U.S. military calls it, on the quality of our health. And in Utah, it's even worse because they have terrible air pollution problems, too, from burning fossil fuels. So he joined Citizens Climate Lobby. I see a few CCL t-shirts here. He joined Citizens Climate Lobby, and he was assigned to the Republican head of the Utah Senate. So the first time he went, he got his foot maybe in the door and left his name. Then he went the next month. He met the 22-year-old intern who had just arrived in the office, and they had a good conversation. The next time he went, he knew the person's name. He's like, hey, how's it going? We had a better conversation. Every single month, he went patiently, month after month, respecting and acknowledging and appreciating the Senate leader's work for the people of Utah. By the end of the first year, he was on a first-name basis with the chief of staff. And every time he showed up, he'd go right to him and say, hey, how's it going? They have a chat. By the second year of visiting every single month, now this is a lot, so we're talking 24 visits at this point, every single time appreciating and acknowledging this man's work in the state of Utah and how much he cared about the people of Utah, how much he cared about the economy, how much he wanted the best for their state. By the end of 2 years, he was on a first-name basis with the actual man. And when I came to town, he said to him, hey, would you like to have breakfast with the climate scientist who's coming? We can talk about climate solutions for Utah. And the man said, absolutely. So we had a fantastic breakfast where we talked all about solutions, about how there's entire towns that depend on coal for their power or for their economy. And if you shut down the coal mine, then there's no jobs for the entire town. So how could they, and this is a question they were seriously pondering, how do we attract and bring in other industries? How do we get them to promise to offer retraining? How could we as the government assist in that retraining process so people can have guaranteed jobs if we shut down the coal mine? We were able to have that conversation over breakfast because over 24 visits, one man named Dave had patiently and kindly and lovingly appreciated, acknowledged, and respected what that man was doing and connected that man's value, the economy of Utah, directly to clean energy and changing climate. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic.